Hi, and welcome to Inside View. I am your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show today is Nancy Longmore, who's with CAL FIRE and works with prevention and also a lot of outreach with the schools, and also Joan Lark, who works with the Ebbets Pass Fire Protection District, also as a prevention officer. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Great to have you both on the show. I feel honored to have such a wealth of knowledge in front of me here, so I hope that we can share with the viewers some tips on how to avoid causing a devastating wildfire, and just common sense, but it just doesn't seem to be quite as common as I'd like it to be. And we live in a very dangerous area when it comes to fire. Why is it so dangerous around here, Nancy?
Well, we have long, hot, dry seasons, summers. We've got a lot of dense vegetation, steep terrain, and a lot of people, and all of that combines to make frequent fires that can be pretty devastating.
And would you say that the fourth consecutive year of drought is just exacerbating the situation?
Oh, absolutely. The live vegetation is extremely dry, and the drought has also caused the death of thousands and thousands and thousands of trees out in the forest, which make bad matters even much worse.
Right, and so you cover Calaveras and Tuolumne counties for CAL FIRE, right?
Yes.
And Joan, you covered the Ebbets Pass Fire Protection District within those boundaries?
Correct.
But that's no small area. That's, what, how many square miles?
I think it's something like 220 square miles.
So that's a big area. How do you cover that much area and just keep tabs on everything?
I don't every year. What I try to do is focus on 2 or 3 subdivisions and then move on to the next subdivision the next year. And I try to go through at least 2 or 3 total subdivisions. And if the people would do what they were supposed to do, then I could go through more. But I've covered between, I'd say 5 and 1,000 lots during a fire season.
So for those out there who might think that they could just ignore it and you might not come by, you don't give warning or notice that you're coming, right? You could be there.
That is correct.
So you always need to be ready.
Correct.
Okay. How long have you been doing this sort of thing, Joan?
This time, the last 5 years, I had done it for about 10 years previous to this time. I had done it in the 90s, and then when our oldest son's wife had a baby, I took time out to babysit. And then when he got in school, this position opened again, I applied, and I'm back.
You're back. And Nancy, how long have you been doing fire-related activities?
Well, this is my 43rd fire season. I've been in fire prevention since 1999 and in this job since 2006. So
I'm confused. You aren't even 43 yet, so have you been doing this since birth, or how does this work?
Thank you, Joel. You're very kind. So I got into being a lookout when I was still in college, and I did that for 20-some years.
Okay.
And then I got into fire prevention. So.
And I'm going to ask Joan this question to you too, but what was it about looking out for fires that first kind of grabbed your interest? What was intriguing to you?
Well, it started when I was 5 years old and went to my first lookout and just was enthused about the idea that grown-ups could live in this little tower, this little tiny bird cage, and look out over the treetops. It just intrigued me, and so I wanted to do that all my life. I did it, and I loved it, and then I was sick and tired of it. So.
I always thought, because you're generally alone, right?
Yes.
I always thought that I would get lonely or just have too much time to think, but you did it for a very long time. How did you do that?
You have to be easily entertained. You have to be good at entertaining yourself and being willing to be by yourself a lot. And it's something that you either love it or you hate it, and I've been on both sides of the coin.
Okay.
So it's time to move on.
And Joan, you also spent some time in a lookout tower, right?
I did. The year that the old Gulch fire started, I was up there when Nancy needed to get time off. I did that, and also Steve Kovacs, who is now the chief in Murphy's and Copper. And so we would spell Nancy so that she could get some time off. And it happened to be in 1992 that happened.
And how long were the shifts in a lookout tower? How did that work?
I think, as I recall, I worked 10 days on, and then you and EPFD.
We just worked a couple of days. We weren't up there as
Okay.
long as Nancy was.
And do you sleep in the tower and everything?
Yeah.
That's where you live. So it's
Yeah.
like a miniature house, the whole
Right.
thing. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
with-
amazing.
Windows 360 degrees, which are a pain in the neck to clean.
I'll bet.
But
I'll
but you
bet.
have just amazing views.
So this was on top of what mountain?
This particular year that we worked together, that was on Blue Mountain, which is
Blue Mountain. What is that near? Kind of West Point area?
it's kind of not near anything. It's between West Point and Arnold, but
And
it's
Arnold,
out in the middle of nowhere.
And would you say that's one of the best vantage points in the county? Okay, so it's up there
Oh,
for a
yeah.
reason.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there and has an incredible view of the Sierras over the Coast Range, north and south, up and down the valley. It's pretty amazing.
I kind of want to go. Is it all fenced off, or do you know?
It's behind locked gates, so
Okay.
you have to get permission from SPI and
Okay.
CAL FIRE to go up there.
Gotcha.
And you can get lost very easily.
So search and rescue might have to go find you if you're not careful. Okay.
You better have a map with you.
Yeah, you want a map.
And now, is this still used? Is that lookout tower still used?
CAL FIRE staffs it during times of high fire danger or lightning,
Okay.
but not full time anymore.
You know, it seems like with the new technologies that we have, with like aerial surveillance or maybe even satellite imagery, do we have a lot more capability than we had in past years to find and locate fires, or is the lookout tower still a key component?
I think there's nothing that can replace human beings up there that can look out and notice something immediately out of place and can give a good update on what's going on, a size up on what it is. There were many times that they would dispatch to fires, and I was able to look out and say, there's nothing visible, or just a small smoke, or, yeah, you've got something that is really going to be a problem.
What was the most amazing or terrifying thing you ever saw from the top of the tower?
The rattlesnake down by the door. Yeah.
That would be awfully
Yeah.
scary. How did he get in there?
There's lots of rattlesnakes on the mountains.
Okay, okay.
Those-
So Joan, same question to you. So Nancy, since she was 5, had kind of a fascination, but you've done many years of work with the fire industry. What first interested you?
We moved up here in 1979, and I got very involved with our homeowners association. And in the early 80s, CAL FIRE started the VIP program. And there was nobody to coordinate it up in Big Trees Village, so I offered. And so I was involved with that for probably 9 years. And then somebody else took over. And it wasn't too long after that that Becky Hastings, who was prevention officer at Ebbets Pass Fire District, advertised for an assistant. So I put my name in and I was hired. And so that's how I had the first stint with Ebbets Pass Fire District, but I started out as a VIP at CAL FIRE.
And what is a VIP?
It's volunteer in prevention, and that is a CAL FIRE program, and they have volunteers in the subdivisions in Ebbets Pass Fire District. They don't have them yet in Tuolumne, do they?
We've got a small group in the Miwok Fire
Okay,
District.
that just started
That
this
just
year,
started
didn't it?
last year, actually.
Was it last year? And so they have these VIP programs, and they have the volunteers in the different subdivisions. They go out and do the first inspections, then turn over the information to Nancy if they haven't passed the second inspection. Or do you do the second now?
No, they do the seconds also.
Okay. And then they turn it over to Nancy. So the VIPs are really important in our area anyhow.
So Nancy, you must work closely with them.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Could
They're-
you do your job without them?
No. They do an amazing job. There's probably between 75 and 100 volunteers just in the Arnold area alone, and that is a program that is unique to California. There is no other VIP inspection program in California except what exists in the Arnold area and in the Miwok Fire District.
Oh.
And they do probably close to 10,000 inspections a year, between the first inspections, the second inspections. And one of our volunteers refuses to be constrained to just fire season inspections. He inspects year-round.
Oh boy.
It's an amazing program. Without them, I would have to be going out there doing the first inspections, all the paperwork, and all the follow-up. And with this, they free me up to do just the citations, which is the enforcement, which is our last resort.
So they're taking care of most of the people who can be educated and kind of counseled, and then maybe they'll bring their lots into compliance. If there comes to a point where you need to go further, then you'll handle that.
It's been a tremendously successful program. If you compare the subdivisions where inspections have been done since the 1980s, there's just a night and day difference between there and the areas where they haven't been doing inspections, because we just simply don't have the staffing to do the inspections that they're able to do.
So it's interesting to me that Calaveras is the one spot in the state that where we have this. Do you know kind of how that happened?
Well, it got started back in the 1980s with one volunteer in prevention named Irma Walpoot.
Yes.
She was the one that got the program started with my predecessor, Sharon Torrance. And like Topsy, it kind of just grew. And it's pretty much a sustaining program now, a self-sustaining program now. People are actually approaching the coordinators for each of the major subdivisions and asking to become part of this program. It helps make communities more fire safe, and the communities are generally more attractive because people are cleaning up their yards, which improves property values. And with the Blue Lake Springs subdivision getting its Firewise community designation last fall, there's a chance that fire insurance rates will drop.
So a Firewise designation is what?
That is a national program through the National Fire Prevention Association, the NFPA. Communities can apply for Firewise designation, and they have to meet certain criteria and pledge to make their community more fire safe and bring the whole community into this effort, make it a community-wide effort, because it just doesn't do any good if one person here does their defensible space clearance and another one does it somewhere else. It needs to be a community-wide effort.
So the whole is greater than the parts that make it up. You have to have that whole, which is like a giant fire break in a way, you could say. And now if a monster like the old Gulch or the what was a rim fire came through, would even a community like that be able to withstand it, or you're just making your chances better?
It depends on a lot of things, what the weather does and
Wind,
so on and so forth, wind and whatnot. And there's no guarantee that defensible space will make your home withstand a fire. It just gives you the best chance. It gives firefighters a fighting chance to protect your home. And ideally, if your home had no firefighter protection, it would be able to withstand the fire without protection.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's say you can't get there for some reason in time, you have a chance. So Joan, you ran the VIP program in Big Trees for a while, and did you find that grew in popularity at the more time you went, more people heard about it, and like Nancy said, people wanted to be part of it? Or?
I wouldn't say it grew in popularity, but it certainly helped with the protection, the fire protection.
So that's an important point. We're talking about something crucial to the safety of the community, but not everyone probably loves this because it has cost involved, there's work, and there's kind of that, well, this is my property, I'll do what I want with it, I can imagine. So Joan, how did you balance kind of the property rights with the safety concerns? How did that work?
Well, you end up talking to the owners, and you go out and you explain what you're trying to do and how it's going to protect their property. And 9 times out of 10, it works. The people understand and they buy into it, and you don't have to tell them again. Or if you do have to send them another letter, it's, oops, yes, I forgot, I have to get on that and do it, and they do it. And so for the most part, the people are very cooperative when you sit and talk to them. It's very seldom you get somebody who digs in their heels and says, no, I'm not going to do it, and then it's, well, go tell it to the judge then.
So there is that enforcement measure too.
Yes.
Will you walk me through, now, and you were doing residentials at that point, but now you're doing unimproved lots.
Correct.
Would you walk me through, so those who may have unimproved lots know, what are you looking for? What are those who own these need to be ready for?
What I tell the people is if you stand on the edge of your property and envision a fire starting, what is going to carry the fire from the ground up into your trees? And it's pretty obvious. If they have bushes underneath the trees and they catch on fire, the trees will catch on fire. Rule of thumb is if a fire starts, the flame is going to be 3 times the height of the bush or whatever's on the ground. So if you explain that to the people and they can look at a bush and say, oh, well, that bush is 5 feet. Oh, okay, I have to clear 15 feet in order for the tree not to catch on fire. Well, the bush goes out. And if you have lots of saplings, I always tell the people to thin them out at least a foot apart and then watch them, because they're not all going to grow. They're not all going to get enough nutrients, and they're not going to get enough water. And so when you explain that to them, most of the time they will go ahead and they'll cooperate.
So if we were to describe a typical lot up in the Arnold area, we'd probably see some conifers, some established conifers like pine trees of some kind, maybe a ponderosa, maybe a Doug fir, maybe a sugar pine, who knows, something like, maybe a giant sequoia.
There are some
Okay.
up in Big Trees Village.
So we have these established trees, some could be as big as this table or bigger, and then we'd have some of the smaller trees, maybe it's conifers also, but then we'd also have, like you said, this understory, bushes, shrubs. How about like bear clover or mountain misery?
Terrible.
Is that a
Very
dangerous plant?
flammable.
It's been known to burn underneath snow.
Burn underneath
Yeah.
snow.
It's very oily, and the higher it gets, the more flammable it is. And CAL FIRE requires 4 inches or lower.
For the mountain misery? Okay, so you got to pretty much mow it
Yeah.
down.
Except within 30 feet of the house or any other structure, no mountain misery at all whatsoever.
No mountain misery. Now, what if it's unimproved lot?
That's when
That's
we
the
try
4
to keep
inch.
it to
Yeah.
the 4 inches.
Okay, but if you don't have a structure, then you have a little more leeway. What about pine needles, Nancy? What's the rule on pine needles?
During fire season, which is pretty much nearly all year round now, when things are crunchy underfoot, you want to have the ground free and clear within 30 feet of any structure.
So pretty much raked and, okay.
Yeah, and if you rake in the spring, you're probably going to need to rake again in June and July. I've already raked my lot 3 times this year. The leaves and needles are falling earlier and faster than they normally do because of the drought conditions.
So the trees aren't hanging on to the needles the way
Right.
they would with plenty of water.
Right, and we are just now approaching the worst part of our fire season. Our worst, biggest, most damaging fires are typically in August and September, right when the needles and leaves are starting to fall. So people really need to stay on top of it.
So it's an ongoing maintenance.
Yes, it
It's
is.
not a one-time
Right.
thing to keep this.
Yeah.
Okay, and so if you have a structure, you have this 30-foot and then this 70-foot with kind of different requirements. Can
Right.
you go over what the 30-foot would be?
Well, the main difference between the 30-foot and the remaining 100 feet, or the remaining 70 feet, is basically what's on the ground. You want your ground clean and free of anything dead. Dead grass, dead leaves, dead needles, that layer of decomposed material which looks like dirt but is organic, which we call duff. You don't want that within 30 feet of your structures. And that's the primary difference between the
But
two
in terms
zones.
of the trimming and eliminating of ladder fuels, that applies to both the 30 and the 70?
That applies to the entire property,
Okay.
or to your property line, whichever's closest. And if you've got more than 100 feet on your property that you could clear, we encourage you to do that too. It just expands your area of safety.
Okay. And on the unimproved lots, there's some amount of pine needles that could stay as long as it's not too thick. Is that right, Joan?
Exactly.
Okay. But if you're getting a big buildup, let's say half a foot or more of pine needles, that could provide a danger and represent a danger. Okay.
It could, exactly.
Is there kind of a pretty steep cost to clear a big lot? Like, what would people be looking at to try to get that cleared?
It can be very expensive, but the prices are set by the individual lot cleaners. And,
Okay.
you don't want to go with the cheapest person. You may get what you pay for. I recommend that people insist that their lot cleaners guarantee their work will meet CAL FIRE standards.
So if it's a sloppy job and then Joan comes back and she goes, this isn't going to cut it, then you're not really getting your money's worth out of that cleaner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Where could someone kind of like get the guidelines? Are those posted anywhere, or would you tell them, Joan, or a VIP would tell them what it needs to look like? Or
I have a form that I go by when I check the lots, and then I have an information sheet that tells what each thing is that I look for and what to do about it. And also for the past several years, Nancy and I have held a joint meeting in March with the lot cleaners. And we invite them to come. We tell them what we expect to see over the fire season and what we're going to be looking for. And the people who attend that meeting are put on a list. And that list is given out to people who need to have their lots cleaned. And I always recommend they get 3 or 4 bids. And then they go with one of those people. Nancy does not have time to go around and check after the lot cleaner is finished. I do. And if they have not done what they're supposed to, I tell the people, do not pay until you get a letter of compliance from me. And it has worked well.
do some people use like powerful blowers to clear lots, or is it usually a rake, or are there any guidelines on how a lot is cleaned? Or
Oh, there's many different tools that they use.
Okay.
And the CAL FIRE inspection form has become very detailed. If people just read it line by line by line, it'll tell them pretty much everything they need to know. And we send out a handout with it that gives more information about what to do and why it's important. And they can also go to the CAL FIRE website and find information on defensible space and clearing around your home.
Yeah, that's a great website. Tons of good info, so hope people visit that. Now, one thing I'm curious about is there must be like that one thing that everyone forgets to do, or that you see the most of. What would you say, even people who maybe should know better, what do you end up saying? You got to do this.
Roof for you, probably.
Roofs, the nooks and crannies, the areas underneath stairs, the wooden stairways that go up or down from the street to your house, checking under those. People don't look under those, but if just the nooks and crannies, wherever snowflakes and raindrops land and pine needles land, embers are going to land there too. And when they land on pine needles and leaves that have been ignored, they're going to start fires.
Okay.
So
Now, are there guidelines for what can be on your roof? Do you have to have it pretty much clear of everything? So no pine needles, no leaves. Gutters need to be cleaned out as well. What are there any particular roofs that you really would prefer to see on more houses? Like, does it ignite at all? Or, I mean, metal probably is good, right?
metal or tile is probably the best. The composite roofs have varying degrees of fire safety. The shake and shingle roofs are the worst.
They are, because it's just wood. Just red. It's like you have kindling on your roof, ready to go. Okay.
But even with metal roofs, a lot of people will neglect to keep their gutters clean. And the needles will pile up in there, and that's where embers would pile up, and it could catch the needles on fire, and then burn the roof sheeting underneath the metal.
So even with that layer of protection, got to keep the gutters clean. And like you said, I mean, we need to emphasize this. This is not a one-time thing, right, Joan? So these people need to be maybe even 3 or more times going back through, if especially near a residence, I imagine, keeping the pine needles cleaned up in the high country. Now, in the west end of our county, in Tuolumne County, we have different challenges. Not so many conifers, more like oak, and then a lot of grassland down there. What should people keep in mind when they're clearing that kind of an area?
Well, they need to cut the grass, for one thing. Within that 30-foot zone around the house, they need to cut the grass as low as possible and then rake the trimmings away. And out beyond that 30-foot zone, they should still rake it as low as possible. And you can leave the trimmings on the ground, but within that 30-foot zone, they need to be gone. and do not use lawnmowers or riding lawnmowers or anything with a metal blade to cut grass after it's dried out. Grass, hot weather, rocks, and metal blades create sparks, and in dry grass, that's a recipe for disaster.
So we're looking at weed eaters.
Weed eaters.
And with the twine that's not metallic or anything
Right.
like that.
And
as
even
it
at that, do your weed eating early in the morning. Keep water handy. A number of our really big fires have started from people trying to do the right thing, but the wrong way.
And there's a cool video on the website, just to bring us back to the website, that actually talks about doing the right thing the wrong way, and it's really informative. So it's neat that CAL FIRE, I think Daniel Berlant is kind of in a lot of those videos. He does a really good job. So that's wonderful. So as this drought continues, and we're not going to get any rain until at least this winter, unless some kind of crazy weather pattern happens, do we have to be even more careful than normal with these tender, dry conditions, Nancy?
Yes, absolutely. If people happen to be watching the news tonight, they'll see that there's just one huge fire after another burning in California. It's just record-setting numbers of fires. CAL FIRE alone has responded to about 1,500 more fires so far this year than we normally do. The fire conditions around the state are just horrific, and our fire forces are stretched really thin. So the fewer fires that we can have, the better off everybody will be.
And is it true the majority of fires are human caused?
Yeah.
So we have the power to make a big difference in this.
About
Joan, anything you want to remind the folks in your area about?
Just if they do have unimproved lots, it's as important to clear them as it is to clear around the houses, because the fire doesn't know the difference between an unimproved and an improved lot. And usually the unimproved lot have much more fire fuel because they haven't been cleaned. Some of them haven't been ever cleaned. And so we try to catch those, but every once in a while it'll slip by. So it's really important for those people to get those cleaned as well.
And again, if you don't do this, you'll get a warning, but it doesn't take long until it starts becoming fines, and that's some big fines there, and eventually even the potential of jail time. So this is very serious. Anything you wanted to leave people with, Nancy?
People need to remember that this is the state law, that you have to do this cleaning whether or not you get an inspection notice each year, because there's just no way we can inspect every property every year, and it's just something that you have to do. Not only is it the law, it's the right thing to do, and the best thing to do for your home, your community, and yourself.
Well, ladies, thank you both for joining me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.